So Gail has got us live, I believe. If not, Gail, speak up. And so good morning, everybody. This is Committee on Agriculture, Thursday morning, Senate Committee on Agriculture. And we have the folks from VHCB with us this morning. I don't know if the committee members would like to introduce themselves, but we could run around the room pretty quickly. Chris, would you like to start off?
Morning, everybody. Chris Pearson, Chittenden District.
Anthony Polina, Washington District, Washington County.
Brian Collmore from the Rutland District, my third term on Senate Ag.
Corey Parent from the Franklin District, first go around here on Ag.
So now I guess I'd like to, we have Gail with us taking Linda's place today as our committee assistant. She also works for government operations. So welcome, Gail, and we'll gonna have a give and take, I guess, from Gus and his crew from VHCB, who played a critical role in our pandemic financial rollout that we had earlier this year. And so Gus, welcome, and welcome to all your folks that have worked so hard on this. We'd like to get an overview from you folks on how things went, what could have worked better, or if everything, I'm sure that everything went just excellent. But if we had another rollout of federal money, how we might want to look at it differently and do things differently. So we'd like to just get the input from your organization in regards to how everything went. So welcome, and I'll hand it over to you, Gus. You're muted, Gus, so that's good. We'll get a lot out of that if you stay muted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, I'm Gus Seelig. I'm the director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and it's been my pleasure to work with the chair since this he initiated our program back in 1987. So we've known each other quite a while now. Senator Parent, welcome to the committee. I look forward to getting to know you better. I think this is the first time we've ever testified in a committee where you've been sitting at the table. And I just want to say we have a broader mission than we'll talk about today. And I think, as you know, there's a building that's just opened in downtown St. Albans. If there's anything you want to talk to us about our overall work, please make our phones ring, and we're happy to work with you and your constituents on that. As a matter of introduction, I probably had the least to do with this work. And so you're going to hear from others than me today primarily. We want to give you some framework for how we do our work. Jen Holler is our policy director. She'll talk briefly in a moment because our work goes very much to water quality and lots of other issues, but she's our policy person and is probably the most accessible member of our staff to the legislature in general. So anytime there's any question and I'm not available, please feel free to let her know of issues you want us to attend to. As the chair, we've been fortunate that over the 17 years of this program, Ella Chapin's been our director for the last 15 and built it from a one-person staff and a small program to a real powerhouse. Ella has decided she's ready for some new challenges and is going to leave us in March. And we're going to miss her greatly, but she's going to be succeeded by Liz Gleason, who's been with us for a decade now and has been integral to the growth of the program. And then Mariah Noth was actually in the trenches on the CRF effort. So with that as some basic introductions, Jen's going to direct the screen share with you. We'll give you an overview of our overall mission and get into the CRF relatively quickly. So we're glad to be here. This opening photo was the Bare Roots Farm in Barrytown, a young farmer who we helped buy a farm. And let's go to the mission, Jen, the mission statement that's in the statute. And basically, the mission tells us that our job is not just to build housing and serve land, but to do it because it's of primary importance to the economic vitality and quality of life of the state. And John Ewing, who was our longest serving board member, said we need to use conservation, basically our conservation programs, as an economic building block for the state of Vermont. One of the things we won't talk about today, but that has been a great success in terms of economic development, is the photo on the right. Senator Starr invented about 4 years ago now a program called the Rural Economic Development Initiative and asked us to take it on. And that program has been helping small towns around the state and entrepreneurs access grants. And reopening the Albany store was one of those projects that got that support. So that's why that photograph is there for you. And the picture below is the Glebelands down in southern Vermont. That connects both recreation and natural areas in a really dramatic way that we funded with some support from the legislature for what they called legacy conservation projects. Let's move on, Jen. This is the results of our work over the last several years, and I'm not going to go into them in any detail today, but the impacts are of multiple dimensions. And again, just in terms of economic and community development, on the right, what you see is the building of a bridge that is going to connect the Bluffside Farm in Newport City to downtown Newport. And the Bluffside Farm is owned right now by the Vermont Land Trust. It's got 2 miles of frontage on Lake Memphremagog, and on the far end of the farm, you can connect up to a rail trail that takes you to the Canadian border. So there's going to be 7 miles of biking and walking that'll go from downtown Newport to the Canadian border. And ultimately, that border will reopen in a way that will make us all happier. But Newport really viewed this as important economic development for themselves to get this bridge built. And to use that farm as an economic development asset. It has some other values as well. The other thing I'll just go ahead.
That trail also connects to a trail in Quebec that goes for miles and miles and miles. So it's really going to be quite an international trail for our people.
Yeah. And I would just say about that, Newport has really struggled, as you all know, since the EB5 meltdown. And this was something that we didn't decide to do, that the community really just came to a consensus would be a great thing to do. And that was not an easy thing to happen. And really hats off to the people in Newport for deciding to rally around this vision as one part of how they rebuild. The other thing I just want to note, and we'll get to this at the very end, is that of the 45 farms that were conserved over the last 2 years, just about half of them were supporting intergenerational transfers of farmland, sometimes within families, sometimes external, but it's a really critical part of our work. So let's go on, Jen, to the next slide. And this is going to be the last place I'm going to stop. We're not going to talk a lot about our conservation work today, but it's been argued to me, and it's an argument I support, that conservation by itself is a really important thing. The viability program has deepened the quality of our conservation work in many ways. The picture in the upper right is what the Schwinger farm looked like when we conserved it in 1999. And the larger picture is what it looks like today. And what happened here is that Guy Schwinger's dad ultimately transferred the farm to him a few years after conservation. And Guy Schwinger is now, well, he's somebody we nominated for something called the Aldous Leopold Award last year for his conservation practices. When the chief of the Natural Resource Conservation Service came to Vermont last year, this is where Vicki Drew took him to see how farmers are doing well by their land. And what happened is, with the development rights gone, Guy Schwinger said, I need to invest in my soil quality. That's where I'm going to make money. He took the farm organic. He's since bought a second farm. When we visited last summer, because this is 20 years since he took it over, he's getting ready to work with his son about how he's going to take it over. It's a gorgeous place. He's cooperated with, used every possible program to improve water quality, and it's just a great success story. And we've seen this happen in many other locations around the state. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I can't resist taking this opportunity to wish you all a happy new year and to say congratulations to Senator Parent for joining the committee. And I also wanted to take just a minute to say that it was part of my work last year to track the CRF allocations and provide information for the committee. And so I spent many hours watching all of you deliberate and angst a little bit and have to make some really big decisions in really short order without a lot of information. And I think that the decisions you made were really, I'm hoping you feel really good about that. I think the ag agency programs that you set up were really successful. Mariah will talk about that more later. But I've had the opportunity to work in and out of state government in a variety of roles, administering programs and setting them up, and actually responding to federal disaster money that comes. And I think that what the state stood up and was really unprecedented in terms of the numbers of programs. And the fact that you served as many farms as you did with just a little bit of money left over, I think that's really exciting, and that's much better than not having had enough in those programs. So I just wanted to comment on that. I'm going to just touch on our water quality work for a second, and then hand it over to Ella. The state's investments through VHCB in farms and forests have always benefited water quality by protecting the soils, land, and waterways from denser development. But a number of years ago, this was made a more explicit part of our statute. We now have an even greater focus on keeping the state's waters clean. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do it by land conservation. That's Benson Lake, Sunset Lake and Benson up in the left. There's a farm here in Calais on the right, and then a young woman here who received a water quality grant and has made some improvements, infrastructure improvements to her farm. And again, Ella will talk a little bit more about those grants later. So our VHCB is part of the state's Clean Water Initiative. We now receive capital bill appropriations that are officially part of the Clean Water budget. There are two different programs that we administer with those, really two line items, but and the first is water quality farm improvement grants, and those are the grants that the viability team puts out. Here's an example of one, a $40,000 grant to this gentleman and to make improvements to his barn and Pollitt. And then also that funding allows us to, when there's an opportunity to work with a farmer, and when there's a piece of land that really is too difficult to farm or just can't meet water quality standards, and they need another opportunity. So this, I'm just going to check my note here for a second, but the Fitzgerald Farm in Colchester was 143 acres that was purchased with support through VHCB by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, so they could restore extensive riparian and floodplain forest along the Winooski River. It was a former dairy. It was entirely in the floodplain and the floodway, and it really made manure storage and management very challenging. There's 1.5 miles of Winooski River frontage, and the picture you see here are folks who are, you might recognize Nancy Everhart, our longtime ag director in the center, but those are folks who are planting trees along the buffer for some restoration there. And then the other piece we do is land conservation with very, very specifically for water quality. And the example that we're showing you here is a 264-acre farm in St. Albans. There's 78 acres of tillable cropland and 140 acres of wetlands. It's part of a larger, high-quality wetland complex with multiple rare and uncommon natural communities. But you can see by the position on the lake, and I'm sure you are all seeing demand for land and housing development, that this would be a very scenic and beautiful place where it to be developed and might have a big impact on the lake. So this is now conserved with VHCB funds, and then we're able to pull in federal matching funds to do that. So those are a couple examples of our water quality work. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen for just a second so Ella can introduce herself and set up the rest of the presentation.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
Morning, Ella.
Thanks for having us. Happy New Year. And I'm just going to speak for a few minutes and in this leadership transition as I prepare to depart VHCB after 15 years and Liz steps up to the helm of program director. I'm just going to set some really high level context around the viability program, particularly for Senator Parent and others that are less familiar with the program. And we will sort of talk through a bit about the viability program overall, and then we will dive into the CRF funds that we stewarded this past year and all of the various work that we did in partnership with the Ag Agency and others to really support farm and other working lands businesses through what's been one of the most bizarre and challenging and difficult years of our experience. So I just wanted to, I'll just speak for a few minutes and then Liz will sort of take the helm. I just want to say that it's really been such a pleasure for nearly 15 years to run the viability program and work at VHCB. It's an amazing institution, and it's just been such a great honor to support our working lands businesses over that time. We have so many amazing entrepreneurs in our state and people who really care about stewarding land and creating jobs and creating food, healthy food for us to eat. So it's just been a really wonderful job, and it's going to be hard to leave, but I am exploring other options this coming spring and summer. I want to remind everyone that the viability program is separately created in statute and was created in 2002 to really improve the economic viability of our originally farm and now both farm and forestry sector businesses. And, all along we have supported the program through state funds, through VHCB, as well as other state and federal funding that we raise to really deliver, to execute contracts with organizations that do business one-on-one, deep dive business coaching to develop business plans, succession plans, work on farmland access, financial planning. And so the structure of our program is that our team really manages those resources and manages an umbrella program with right now about 8 or 9 organizations that provide business planning activities. And so we call those our service provider organizations. And we also sort of manage that network of organizations, provide professional development opportunities and networking opportunities, and try and ensure that that group of organizations from UVM Extension, the Intervale Center, NOFA Vermont, the Center for an Agricultural Economy, the Sustainable Jobs Fund, and a few others, really all are keeping up with the needs of entrepreneurs and businesses on the ground. So we, the outcome of that business technical assistance is that we see businesses that go through the program. It's typically a 2-year engagement with businesses that fully enroll in our program. And over that 2 years, there's regularly meeting and talking with their business advisor, as well as sometimes a team of other technical assistance providers to support whatever their business objectives are around growth or financial viability or changing expenses to diversification to succession. So the outcomes we see are really varied, but they range from increased jobs and gross income to particularly improvements in profitability and net income. We see folks finding better work-life balance and improving their skills in a range of business areas, from financial analysis and bookkeeping skills to decision-making skills, human resources management, and a broad range. So those are the sort of the outcomes we aim for in our business assistance work. Then we really have run over the years a number of other initiatives within the viability program that complement that core business assistance. And all of this, as Gus mentioned, sort of complements our conservation work. We don't only work with businesses that have conserved land or are on conserved land through the viability program, but historically about a third of the businesses we do work with are either already conserved or in the process of conserving, and a lot of our farmland access work is jointly with our conservation tools and conservation partners. So some of the complementary programs, you're going to hear a little bit about our grants program, just to make sure we connect the dots on that and how that work supports entrepreneurs. But we've had business plan implementation grants, and now water quality grants, and a couple of other grants programs that we've run over the years. The Rural Economic Development Initiative really is run out of our shop. The Vermont Food Hub Collaborative is a project that we've supported and may touch on a little bit later briefly. And then we've also done a lot of leadership, both regionally in the Northeast as well as nationally, around that sort of professional development and training for business advisors in the agricultural sector. So I just want to say a few words about sort of how important the CRF funds have been for us. And then I'm going to turn it over to Liz. When the pandemic hit late March, we immediately thought about redeploying some of the funds we already had deployed with those sort of 8 to 10 organizations across the state to provide sort of immediate support to businesses. And it's something we did after Irene as well. We were in a good position as a state entity to sort of redeploy some of those resources and support those organizations in doing really immediate relief work. And we were able to do that again with some of the resources we already had deployed. And then with a WELA $50,000 grant, and then followed by the CRF funds, we're really able to roll out a whole new program around supporting folks through the pandemic. And Liz will talk more about that in a minute. But I just want to say that, we really couldn't have done it without the partnerships with the Ag Agency and all of the different nonprofits that do the business assistance on the ground, along with a whole slew of private consultants that were more available than usual at the beginning of the pandemic and felt so strongly about caring and supporting businesses. So you're going to hear a lot of those stories in a moment. So I'm just going to say that it's been a pleasure to work with Liz for the last 10 years, and so glad she's stepping into the program director role, and I'm going to turn it over to Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Ella, and committee members. If you have any questions, raise your hand, and we'll get to you, in a little break, or we'll run it kind of loose. So, well, thanks a lot. Certainly going to do, in the years ahead, but want to certainly thank you for all your work over, golly, ever since I've been in the Senate. I think you have run this program and for Gus, and it's been a good run. So thanks a lot.
Well, thank you all for your support of the program and partnering on many other initiatives over the time. So thank you.
We will miss you greatly.
Well, welcome, Liz, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's great to meet all of you. And I guess I'll just take a sec to introduce myself. Like Ella just shared, I've been at VHCB for 10 years in the viability program, and have, a background before that in working on farms and with VHCB's AmeriCorps program before I started on staff. And I was just reflecting on some of the pictures that we've shown so far and thinking about the time that I spent working on Adams Berry Farm in the Intervale. As many of you probably know, it floods almost every year. It's both an amazing place to farm, an amazing resource for Burlington and Chittenden County, but also a fragile one. And it's so connected to water quality and quality of life for people in that area. And so that picture that had a bunch of people standing out in the field in Colchester just feels really impactful in terms of how can we collectively come together across state agencies and across business and community and really think about how to protect our water and provide for quality of life in that area. I saw that place flood almost every year, saw banks run off into the river. So it's a really great project and we're excited about it. Just stepping back a little bit to the overall Farm and Forest Viability Program and our impacts. I think this program is one of many at VHCB that's really focused on that rural economic development theme. And that means everything from those really quantifiable impacts around significant increase in profitability for participants, adding jobs. We see over time that participants in the viability program end up adding an average of 0.5 to 2 jobs per business over the course of their participation. We're a multi-year program where folks who enroll can get help over 1 to 3 years. And people come back. So we definitely see people over time and that can just result in some really significant impacts in terms of the numbers. But I think there's also some of those less quantifiable impacts around quality of life, ability for a business to reinvest both in their operations and in their community. So with a lot of these businesses that we work with, we really see all of their hiring and purchasing is local. So each of them is a sort of mini economic driver in their area as well. And one of our goals as a program is to be able to support that and support the entities that are helping our working landscape continue to be sort of a viable part of our economy. And I think the economy is a really important part of this, but there's also and not to separate them exactly, but there's also the conservation side of this. The reason the viability program was formed as part of VHCB was because we had been investing so much in farmland conservation and natural area conservation and realizing that that's an incredibly key part of the sustainability of those industries, but it's not the only thing that they needed help with. So we really see a great partnership between the conservation side and the business side here. And one particular example of that, I'll talk a little bit about our forest viability program. So these are 2 forest products businesses we've worked with over time, a logger on the right and a small mill on the left. This is LSF Forest Products in Fletcher and Labrie Logging in Danville. And they are small businesses that are involved with timber harvest. And that business model is only gonna continue to be viable if we have healthy, non-fragmented forests. So we also do forest landowner succession planning for folks that own like really big tracts of land and are not sure how to keep that intact. And so the logging and forest products industry is so tied to the health of our forests and the continuity of forest land. And we just consider, the fact that without those businesses, we'll lose a real solid stream of local product that can sequester carbon and provide jobs. And there's just a myriad of sort of interconnected pieces of it. So another really big aspect of our work recently has been around land access, particularly for beginning farmers. over the last couple of years, we actually received a significant and new federal source of funding for us called the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program, which was really instrumental in significantly expanding the amount of land access and beginning farmer work we've been able to do, and some really great impacts out of that. We worked with over 200 farmers through that, and 76% of the beginning farmers there successfully accessed land after participating, and that's either through a purchase or a really long-term secure lease. And of the retiring and exiting farmers we worked with through that program, 56% of them successfully transferred that land to new farmers. And that, while it's a smaller percentage than that 76, I think that process can just be so complex and such a really long-term process that we're really proud of that result. And generally over time, the succession and land transfers is a really big theme in our work, and we only see it growing. This Honeyfield farm is a great example of providing both succession assistance to the exiting farmer and startup assistance to this new farmer. So this is a couple who met while they were working on a farm up in, I think, Fairfax for years, and they were looking for land for years. They had a little tiny business of their own on the side, and they really needed a place to grow and scale up. And we helped them work really closely with an exiting farmer, Killdeer Farm in Norwich. They had an existing business. These young folks were able to purchase it and really scale up. And they bought it the year before COVID, and we're trying to grow their business at the same time as trying to manage a global pandemic. And we also helped them figure out how to manage distribution and direct to consumer sales and just all the zillions of little flying around details that they had to figure out to really successfully navigate that transition. And then I'll just quickly, we've talked about the grants so far. We sort of see our investments in the viability program going in one of two courses, either funding the business advisors who do the work on the ground, which is mostly what we've been talking about, and then also direct payments to farmers to assist with particularly water quality investments, and sometimes our implementation grants, which really help people who have recently completed a business plan through our program specifically implement key parts of that. Just the economic realities of agriculture, there's not always a lot of cash on hand to really be able to take those critical steps. And we find that these grants really make a difference in terms of people's ability to expand their businesses, increase profitability, invest in land stewardship. I think we can go to the next slide. Ayers Hill Farm is another really great example of a business we've worked with in different capacities over time. So helped Carrie Atherton when she was purchasing the farm, I think from her uncle. So helped a bit around that transition process. She has gotten I believe a dairy improvement grant from us to really increase the efficiency of her cropping operation. And most recently, and a really exciting turn of events, folks were coming to her at the start of the pandemic, wondering where can they buy milk, and wanted to be able to purchase more directly from their local farmers. And she actually started like a little mini creamery. So still sells in the more traditional veins, but also has a small farm store where she sells her milk and beef and other local food. And that was a direct result of the really interesting shift in demand in March. So I'm going to hand it back over to Ella, who's going to talk a little bit about the Food Hub Collaborative project we've been working on.
Yeah, I won't dwell here, and if folks want to talk about this later in discussion, you're welcome to ask us about it. I just wanted to mention that we have been supporting what's called the Vermont Food Hub Collaborative for food hubs, the Intervale Food Hub, Green Mountain Farm Direct, Green Mountain Farm to School in Newport, Food Connects down in Brattleboro, and the Center for an Agricultural Economy in Hardwick, which took over a food distribution business called Farm Connects, as they work to better move food through Vermont and start to develop a brand and really really do sales outside of Vermont to really move product for small and medium scale farms. This is definitely an important aspect of supporting, ongoing diversification of farm businesses and newer and early stage farm businesses to provide markets for farm products. And they've really been growing quite a bit and are doing some really exciting work. And just one area, one way that that VHCB and the viability program can help in efforts that connect more to food distribution, aggregation, distribution, processing, and then also these nonprofit organizations and their food hub enterprises do a lot in relationship to food access and food security. And particularly during the pandemic, thankfully, we've all been investing in things like these organizations because they did an incredible job at ensuring some local food got into the families to food boxes, CFAP federal program in partnership with the distributor, and a myriad of other food access projects over this past year during the pandemic.
Is that the group, John, somebody that runs that, the Food Hub Collaborative?
I'm
Do you know who looks after that, Ellen?
Well, we've been supporting it as sort of a fiscal sponsor, and then it's really the executive directors of those 4 nonprofit organizations. So Intervale, Green Mountain Farm. Are you talking about John Ryan, or there's also a new business? John Ramsey.
Yeah, Ramsey. Does he do something with that?
Yes. So John is one of the 4 sort of directors of the Food Hub Collaborative because he's the executive director at the Center for an Agricultural Economy.
Yeah.
And I think his organization took on the distribution business that Ella just mentioned to help move the product all over the state.
Yeah, we need to get those folks in eventually here, and because we did have an issue, the people that were doing that couldn't do it or didn't do it well, and they took it over, and I haven't heard too much more about it, but distribution is a big issue, both picking up from farms as well as getting it distributed out to the different food banks in areas where people can pick this up.
Well, I'll tell you that I'm helping coordinate a presentation this afternoon to a group of philanthropic funders about the next step of the Food Hub Collaborative and the distribution opportunities and sales to outside Vermont. So I'm sure they'd be happy to come in and share some of that presentation, especially the Vermont brand work that they're about to launch. They've been investing in a Vermont brand that's going to really help move that food to outside of Vermont markets. And it's pretty exciting. So happy to help coordinate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we wanted to spend some time digging into the COVID response programming and coronavirus relief funds. So just that investment in special appropriation was really instrumental in helping this network of service providers that we coordinate be able to pivot and be incredibly responsive and become instantaneous experts on all things related to how to help people respond and recover to the pandemic. And I'm not going to really say any more than that. I'm just going to let Mariah dive into some of the stories because I think they're really impactful and would love for you to hear them.
Yep.
Thank you, Liz. And hi, folks. I'm Mariah Noth. Can folks hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So I do our outreach and communications for the viability program. I've been with the program now for over 1.5 years. It's gone by really fast, with the majority being a pandemic situation. And then so during this time, my role has really been about doing outreach about our program, informing folks about it and getting folks enrolled in our program or referred to the correct resources that they need. And then that role evolved during the pandemic time to really be pretty fully consumed by enrolling folks in our COVID response program and getting them connected with the variety of consultants and service provider organizations that we were working with. But also then, in my work with the Agency of Agriculture and being really up to speed on the various programs, I ended up taking on a bit of that role to try to stem the tide and get folks directed to resources myself or help them through the application processes that I had information on. So that's been my role at this time. And I come to this work with a background in community development and municipal planning. And then on the production side, I've actually worked in grape production, both in New Zealand as well as in hybrid viticulture here in the state of Vermont. So really excited to be here, and thank you so much for having us here today. If you want to go on to that next slide, Jen, that would be great. So through our COVID response programming, which has run from late March to mid-December in kind of its first phase and supported through the CRF funding, we were able to connect folks with a variety of services. We worked with 524 unique businesses overall and saw many of those businesses return to us for help as new relief programs became available and new funding sources and things of that nature. I just will say as well, it was just really beneficial to be so connected with the Agency of Agriculture. I was on weekly meetings with those folks. So I was, keeping up to speed on their grant programs as they advanced, as they developed, and as they reopened in certain stages over time. And having that connection and that direct conduit was just crucial in being able to get folks timely and helpful information to help them fill out those applications. Additionally, I was in a variety of ways, I was the one behind the emails, the phones, the texts. So communicating with farmers and producers as well as forest products businesses throughout the process in a variety of ways, and just being able to meet folks where they were at. I'd say definitely one of the common threads was just the lack of access to internet and just less general usage of technology among lots of folks that we were working with. So I was really the person at our program that was connecting with folks and making sure that they were either, on the right path with what they were looking at or applying for, or getting connected with a business advisor who could support them through gathering their financial documentation, transferring it from, handwritten ledgers to something digital to an Excel spreadsheet so that their information could be accepted by, both the federal programs that were out, including the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, and then, of course, the state programs that had been made available later on during the pandemic.
Mariah, Senator Collmore has a question. I have a question. Senator, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mariah, I'm just wondering where maple might fit into this pie chart.
Yes, so maple is actually under forest and wood products businesses, and we definitely worked with a variety of maple businesses, though I think in most cases, we worked with a lot of dairies who also had a maple as a component to their business, who could then apply for both the dairy grants as well as the working lands grants that came out through the state of Vermont.
Great, thank you.
And Mariah, how did you find our group of people in all these different categories? How well are they keeping track of their records so that they could qualify for the pandemic money or CARES money? Were they keeping their records properly and good, or do we need to spend more time and effort into training these businesses in that area?
Thank you so much for that question, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think, and I'd invite the rest of my team as well to comment on that as well. But just from this experience, I would say it was extremely wide ranging, the state of the books, if you will, for really every type of business across the gamut. I would say even those that had, really were really already deeply embedded in a system like QuickBooks or something like that. They had to do some work to get it into a place where, it could be by month, or that they could break out their enterprises to really be able to understand where their losses were and be able to make those claims and justify those. I would say that at least half, if not the majority, were in a place of either non-existence, disarray, or needing quite a bit of work to get them into a place where they could be acceptable. And I think a lot of folks for the first time had really heard the word profit and loss statement or balance sheet. Many of the folks that I was speaking with, it was great that the agency created, a really simple template for some of those types of documents that I was able to, help folks access. And then our service providers really did a lot of that more in-depth financial work with folks to get their numbers in a place where they could be acceptable for these grant programs. But I would say that is just a prime example of where, in so many ways, the pandemic really, it didn't create very many new issues. It really more exacerbated issues that had already existed, and I think revealed to the service provider network and to the agency as well, just the need for ongoing support with financial planning, not just to even have the numbers digitized for one, but to make those numbers useful to the business and to be able to make decisions based on that is something that I think we've got some continued work to do for sure.
Yeah, and I think, Gus or Ella, or I think this is an area because, see, we had some people that didn't qualify for CARES money, and so the question was from me is, well, why didn't they qualify? And well, the answer came back as well. Some of them didn't have good enough records to show where they'd lost their money. So I'm wondering if, and you're already thinking about it, and if in the future, Gus, in your shop through Farm Viability, we might want to think about beefing that up more toward the bookkeeping area and getting people boots on the ground to push these people to do that, because the feds are sticklers when it comes to proof of losses, and we should be doing a better job anyways, I guess. Not we as legislators and caretakers, but we as a society should be doing a better job in keeping track of the money.
I can speak really briefly to that. I don't disagree that it's always surprising to see businesses that really don't have their books in order, and it can be a real barrier. I know from talking with our business advisors and hearing from Mariah that there was a wide range of outcomes in terms of which federal or state programs were the best fit and chosen by businesses. And in some cases, even just the headache of a certain application made it so that and a better potential financial outcome with a different program might mean they went through FSA instead of the ag agency. So I think that there's a wide range of reasons as to when businesses fit with the state programs or didn't. But I also do know that certainly this was an eye-opener for some folks about how many people don't have their books in order. I'd say about 50% of the time our business advisors spend with clients is literally all on financial record keeping and financial management. And a lot of new, for certain years, almost all of our businesses are sort of getting into QuickBooks and new bookkeeping systems. So it's a major part already of the viability investment. I think what we find is that there's just still so many businesses that haven't been through our program or haven't found those resources on their own. So there's definitely opportunities to maybe do lighter touch work to just help people with their record keeping. And that's something that we should explore. And we've talked a bit with Secretary Eastman about, because that's certainly something she's very, very knowledgeable about. I do think that before we really change any programmatic things, it would be worth talking with our business advisors, and we could help line up you to hear directly from some of them and also from some businesses about, about how easy it is to push people in that regard, and how and when it works well to sort of bring people in, and just think about the program design in that way. It's something we're interested in investing more in.
Yeah, thank you, Ella.
All right, so yeah, just transitioning here into a couple of stories. So this family, it's the Pope and Ouellette family that own Iroquois Acres in Bridport. And so they're really, a great example of, a client who hadn't worked with the viability program through business advising or through our 2-year program previously, and had actually heard about the COVID response program when they applied for a water quality grant this year to get a piece of equipment to improve water quality on their conserve farm. So they reached out to us, and like many conventional dairy farms, as you folks are well aware, were really hit hard by the quotas that were instituted by the milk cooperatives during the pandemic. So it's both, a drop in production as well as a drop in price that just, for businesses that are kind of already at that razor thin margin in terms of meeting their cost, it just, they were really put in a position where they weren't going to be able to cover the cost of production. So they were, they met with us early on in the pandemic, as, many programs were just coming out from the federal government. It was very confusing. There was a lot going on. And so they just really needed some support to understand, for, a farm of their size that's on over 2,000 acres, what should they be doing? How should they be, allocating their resources? So they reached out to us, and we paired them with one of our consultants, Rose Wilson, who is known to develop many budgeting tools and cash flow analysis programs for folks. And so basically she was able to help them navigate the various relief resources available, understand how their finances needed to be in order to be able to apply for those resources. So, an example of someone who had their documentation together, who was in many ways ready to go, but still needed some support in navigating these very new and different programs. And then they were also able to a budgeting tool that they continue to use. I chatted with Stephanie Pope a few weeks ago, and she was just absolutely enamored with the way that they had never used something like that before to help them allocate their resources, using an Excel spreadsheet to understand where their costs were, where their profits were, and be able to make decisions moment to moment based on that. And they had, created a really unique tool with Rose for their specific business. So they're still continuing to use that, and an example of someone who is really interested in enrolling in our full program, having seen the benefits of this type of planning and working with an advisor.
So Mariah and Mr. Chair, this is Jen, and I'm going to just jump in to let our team know that you have other witnesses scheduled at 10. So I think what I'm going to do is jump to our last slide and let Gus bring us to a close, and then you can ask any questions.
Sure.
Sorry. Well, actually, maybe this is a good one. Gus, did you want to speak to this one, or Liz, and then we can go to the last slide?
Well, since we're running low on time, I guess I would make 2 points, and Liz, add in if I'm missing something. But the point I would make is a crisis like this provides also opportunity. You've all heard the expression, never waste a crisis. The 524 farms that we worked with over these last 8 months or so. Some we knew before, but many we did not. And it is going to drive demand now that they know about us for more service, for more assistance. So let's not waste the opportunity, having engaged with so many people and knowing that there are more who need support, especially because we're not done with the economic difficulties that this pandemic has caused, to make an investment. I think I've been saying to you for any number of years that if our budget went up, this is one of the very first places I would invest and increase in our budget. And just to give you some context, and there's much work to do, as this slide suggests, around access to farmland, succession planning, water quality, along with COVID relief. I've been saying for quite a while that, our budget from the transfer tax is about $10 million a year, another $6 million from the capital bill. We're now spending $900,000 on the viability program and the READY program out of that $10 million. I've easily said we could deploy another $250,000 in this program in past years. Given what I see as increased demand, I would have no hesitation to say that we can certainly go well beyond that for $500,000. You will receive in early February an update on the Ag Strategic Plan and recommendations there. That's going to include recommendations to greatly increase investments in viability. So whether we're focused just on bookkeeping or how we continue to help farmers pivot. One of those slides was about Fairmont Farms. They lost a milk contract and started selling beef. That's not a small farm. It's not a farm that didn't lack sophistication and so on. But there are going to be opportunities that come out of this crisis that it would be a shame to waste. So this is a place where I would just say, as we proceed in the session, and Senator Starr, I'll be seeing you and your other committee, usually late March, early April, an investment here in this program, whether it's about bookkeeping or it's about helping businesses pivot or get more sophisticated in their strategy, would be well spent.
And that's a READY program you look to?
I'm talking about the viability program overall, along with the READY. READY is a part of the viability program, but I'm talking about both of them.
Yeah. How many in the READY program? Do you have any idea how well that's worked in the past year or two?
Well, over its first 3 years, Liz will correct me on the numbers, you invested $225,000, and I think we helped something like 25 or 30 businesses and communities win over $4 million in grants, both from public sources and from philanthropy. The last thing I want to say to you is, in working on the issue of transition, it was important for me to talk with lots of our stakeholders, including philanthropic supporters. So I had a conversation with Gabe Symington, who's at the High Meadows Fund now, has been a great supporter of the viability work. And I was talking about what does she think we need in the transition. I think when I called her, she thought I was calling her to ask for money. And so the first thing she said is, there's no reason for philanthropy to support this program anymore. It is not a demonstration. It is proven, and it is foundational, and the public needs to recognize that and invest in it. So I would say to you, whether it's the business planning or the READY program, both of these things have shown themselves to be very effective. I think the pandemic is giving us a larger audience of people who want support, want to improve their businesses, need to improve them because the business environment has shifted so much as a result of the pandemic, and can only ultimately strengthen agriculture in Vermont. So we'll look forward to continuing that conversation with you at a future time. I think the other big issue that we hope to talk with you more about is just how do we, I've heard from Jason Gibbs many times that demographics is our destiny. A big part of our work is getting the next generation into ownership. And that's a subject, I think, for another day, but I hope we can come back and talk with you more about our work with many partners, both on the business advising side and the conservation side, about how to make those investments.
Yeah. Are there questions from any of the committee in regards to what we've just heard from this presentation? If not,
Mr.
Gus?
Chair, I just hope, to Gus's last point, that we will spend some time with him and others on this. I think it's really important, and appreciate you all being tip of the spear in terms of the quasi-public way we're doing this work.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I was going to tell Gus that anytime that he had something that we should know about, if we haven't contacted you folks, certainly feel free to give me a call or Linda a call, and because we know, as a committee, we know how important your work is to our rural economy and the people of the state. Anthony, Senator Polina.
Yeah, just a thought. I'd been talking with a group of farmers, this was going back a couple months, but about their efforts to try to pull down grants and other forms of funding. And I mentioned the READY program, which works, as we all know, with rural communities, and it's gone really well. And I wondered if there was ever a thought, or could be a thought, about doing something similar, but directed specifically at farmers looking to pursue grants or other forms of financing, where there could be a person or two who acts as their mentor as they go through this process. I don't know if that seems like something that could be put on the table or not.
I think it is currently part of the program, Senator. So I think there are a number of times that we've helped, for instance, farmers access the value-added producer grants that USDA operates, as just one example of work we've been doing. So definitely, if you're talking to farmers, refer them to the READY program.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Anything else? If not, thank you very much, Gus and Jan and Ella, and good luck to you in the future, Ella. It's just bad that you're leaving, but it's good. Change is good for all of us from time to time. So anyways, thanks a lot for your time and all the hard work you've been doing on behalf of Vermonters for not only this last year, which has been very difficult, but for many years. So thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
And Gail, is Carolyn with us? I guess so. She's right on the screen, just waiting for us to get going here. If committee members, if anytime you want to take a short break, just raise your hand. We can take 5 minutes or 10, whatever. But just let me know. So Caroline, welcome to the committee, and we have Graham with us as well. Do you have any other members that will be joining us or not?
Yes, our legislative intern, Charlotte Boyden, is with us today as well. And I was hoping that she might have a brief.
Okay, there we go. So maybe we'll run around and introduce ourselves as a committee. Because Graham and you know us. I don't know if Colette knows us or not. So Chris, you want to start out?
Good morning, Chris Pearson from Chittenden District.
Hi, Anthony Polina, Washington County.
Brian Collmore from the Rutland District.
And Corey Parent from Franklin District.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Essex Orleans District. So Caroline, we'll let you lead off, and you can introduce your guest, and the floor is yours.
Chairperson Starr, I think we've just lost Carolyn. She had frozen up, so I assume that she'll be coming back into the meeting.
Well, that's not good, losing Caroline right when we're just firing up. We could switch to Graham. Did you want to lead off, Graham?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Starr. I'm happy to start, and maybe Caroline can just take over from me and then come back to me. My name's Graham Unings-Rufinat, and I'm the policy director at Rural Vermont. And as I think most of you know, Rural Vermont is a farmer advocacy organization that's been around for over 35 years. Senator Polina was instrumental in the foundation of this organization, and we've worked through education, organizing, direct action, and advocacy to work on farm equity, agricultural equity, and access over those decades. And I think just going off of what Caroline was saying, oh, it looks like you're back, Caroline. Just let me know if you're ready, but I was going to hand it over to Charlotte to introduce herself before I hand it back to Caroline.
Yeah.
I'm joining via phone now. Our internet kicked out here for a second. You just introduced the organization. I can continue with my part of the presentation, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, well, in any way, technical difficulties, I think, is one of the big subjects of the legislature as well in terms of accessibility. So here we go. One example. I'm glad to see you all online. It's of course also a little bit fun to have a little bit of an insight in everyone's living rooms. So I'm optimistic for this virtual session to be a successful one, and we're looking forward to working with you again. In terms of COVID relief assistance programs, we don't hear that something is in the pipeline for us to work on at this time. While there's movement on the federal level, of course, instead, we're excited that the program we've been working on so successfully with your committee has been awarded completely, and that it was that there was sufficient need for the program, and that there have been many ag and food businesses that could have been that have been supported, and VHCB and the agency did tremendous work on that. And now the next step for us in that regard will be to look back and to analyze lessons to be learned from that effort. How could these programs be better and more accessible and easier to manage for farmers, especially. And that's something where we collaborate with the agency on. So the agency is leading a survey effort that we will be able to give input on, and that we will also help to promote among our constituents to give feedback on. And then, of course, what is an ongoing devastating issue that we advocated for last September is the meat processing capacity in the state. We're hearing from constituents about slaughter slots being booked into 2022 already. And here it remains our main interest that the committee discusses which short-term mitigation strategies are available for the livestock community in the state. Aside from long-term investments, we just need to create more space for meat processing now. And there's, I'm sure, many different pathways to achieve that, including on-farm slaughter and advancing that law. And to get more of a clear idea of where our constituents see that law going into prior to its sunset in 2023, we will push out a survey at the end of the month to get, to grasp our policy priorities moving forward. But it still seems like a good idea that increasing the capacity of on-farm slaughter allowances might be something that could make the practice more viable for farmers to even consider doing it. But next week I'll have to file another record request in that regard because the last quarter's reporting period ended by the end of December, and now at the 15th there's the reports due, and we didn't forget that the legislators, especially from House Ag, tasked us with increasing the registrations and reports for the practice. So we did a lot of outreach in that regard, and we also were able to do a socially distanced workshop in the fall, and we hope that this shows some results in terms of actually farmers registering and reporting for the practice. Then another effort we're working together on, I just got the draft from Linda Lehman of the compost bill. Of course, we're very happy to hear that your committee is still interested in shepherding this through with us. And we also think this is the composting bill is an effort that serves the needs for the pandemic, because we know that every 1 in 3 Vermonters is food insecure, and allowing for the on-farm composting of food residuals without tremendous bureaucratic barriers would make it easy for farmers to adapt this innovative practice of allowing poultry to forage on food residuals. And that is an ag practice that would eliminate the #1 expense in poultry raising, the feed cost, and that would allow for very cheap production of eggs as well as poultry meat, and potentially also make then these products more cost effective on the market. So this is exciting for us, and yeah, we're looking forward to work with you on that. And I just, brief statement on that. The draft I saw is exactly what we had on the table at last. The bill, how it passed out of committee, and that still satisfies our need from the poultry farmers for compost foraging. So we're very excited for that. And then other issues. Yeah. Senator Starr, were you about to say something? I can pause.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
The only thing is we've got to do some outreach work on the poultry and composting bill. We've got to try to get that resolved and done this year. So we've got to do some outreach work with other committees and other folks within the legislative branch to get that passed.
Yeah, and we've been also not sleeping over it. We in the meantime we're gaining support from Nova Vermont, VPERC, the Conservation Law Foundation, in this regard. So we have some organizational partners in this as well, and we are also from our constituents, people are interested in hearing how this effort continues, and so we also have many constituents in support of this.
Yeah,
then
that's
what else?
Good.
Yeah. So what else?
If you could get letters from them of support to be able to use, for us to be able to use as we move forward with that would be very helpful, Caroline.
Thank you. Yeah, we can request that. Yeah, no problem. Then what else we hear from constituents in terms of how COVID affected them? One issue has surfaced a couple of times, and that is the marketability of constricted regulated farm products. And there are talks specifically about raw milk and on-farm slaughtered poultry. So we have constituents that are just concerned that, or that noticed that neighboring farms might have a farm stand that is at a location more highly frequented than their own farm stand, but then having the inability to actually place their product, their raw milk or their on-farm slaughtered poultry in their neighboring farm stand or in a neighboring farm's more comprehensive CSA, for example. And since farmers, from their perspective, when a product is legally on the market, having these constraints in terms of marketability is hard to explain for us. Even though we understand that from a traceability perspective, there's also reason behind these constraints, but still, I guess what I want to say is that while the pandemic has forced farmers to shift market channels in dramatic ways, maybe it's now a good time to also think about how we can make it easier for folks to bring their product to market and advance their marketability. If it, and if it's just a neighboring farm, maybe there's a middle path to allow for something like that without losing entire grip of the traceability, since it's just down the road and someone relatable anyways. So that's something we'd like to discuss with you. This is something where we're in communications with leaders from the raw milk community and from practitioners of on-farm slaughtered poultry. And yeah, just for the memory, on-farm slaughtered poultry is regulated very differently from on-farm slaughtered livestock. And you can slaughter on-farms poultry up to 20,000 birds and make it a USDA inspected slaughter facility like Maplebrook Wind Farm does it. So there's, and you can have on-farm slaughtered poultry in restaurants. And yeah, obviously that is a market that is especially affected from these shifts. And then we also recognize that we can't, do everything in legislative session this year because of the COVID constraints and the, how that is taking your guys' time. So we're also investing in the processes that the legislature has put in place outside of legislation. And there we're talking especially about the Payment for Ecosystem Services Working Group and the Global Warming Solutions Act. So the Global Warming Solutions Act has a subcommittee for aquaculture and also a subcommittee for just transition, and rural Vermont is very interested in following that process and informing that process where appropriate. And we're also looking for a symbiosis of that process to the Payment for Ecosystem Services Working Group. And we're not just waiting for the reconvening of the working group. In the meantime, we were partnering with the White River National Resource Conservation District.
Can you hear us, Caroline? Or?
We had a good run there for a while.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we want to switch back to Graham. Oh, Caroline's back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was I gone? So just to wrap this up here, am I back? Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Yes.
So just to wrap this up, there's research we did with Vermont Law School and the Center for Agriculture and Food System, which would give also new legislators a chance to get an overview of what the working group has been working on so far to date. And that research also dives into some of the open questions that the working group is confronted with now. And so that would be an incentive if the committee would be open to invite the students that have been doing this research to give a brief presentation on Payment for Ecosystem Services. I think it would be a good launch of this work to continue this year, and for you to have that overview and from a more objective perspective than the working group itself. And then lastly, from my perspective, yeah.
Pardon?
And lastly, from my perspective, of course, in terms of farmer participation, we were working on finding a virtual format for our Small Farm Action Days so that farmers can bring their stories into the process and voice the issues that are of their concern. And there we're hoping that we can find a time with your committee and the House Ag Committee to do meet and greet with farmers once a month over the course of the next 3 months. And I think, this is something I hope to follow up with you so that we can maybe find a time that works for you all.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that to the committee that you would like to do this. it's kind of hard yet to decide for us when we're going to have the time, because like at lunchtime, almost every day there's something happening. You know, there's caucuses and meetings and like today at noon, we're supposedly we have a meeting going on starting at noontime. Then at 1 o'clock, we go on to our afternoon committee or go on the floor, and then afternoon committees. But we would like to be able to take part in those as much as possible, Caroline. And it's just trying to figure out a time that we might be able to suggest to you that would help.
I understand. And Representative Partridge voiced yesterday that maybe 10:30 would be a better time.
Well, yeah, they meet all day, so and there's 7 or 8 of them, and you know, it's a lot different in the House than it is with us folks in the Senate, because there's only 5, and you know, I hate to designate one person to take part in your thing but miss out on committee work. But we'll talk about that and try to figure out a time that would be suitable for you and the others.
Awesome. That sounds good.
One thing that we have talked about, and I think you brought it up. I mean, all the things that you did talk about, like the on-farm slaughter, the TSAs, being able to move product easier, you know, composting, we're already on to that. But those things are all things of interest to us, and that we want to try to move forward with. The ecosystems process is, you know, very important. So that, you know, that all sounded good. And the one issue that we haven't talked a lot about that maybe you mentioned or should be thinking about is when you some of the farms, regardless of whether they were dairy, but just some of the farms, it's been reported that almost half of them don't have good record keeping, and it's very difficult for them to, like when they apply for grants and loans and things like that, to show losses, and so they didn't really qualify. And so I think, you know, in general, we need, anytime we can, we need to beef that part of their business programs up. And so if we do get a new program coming along from Congress or the federal government, that they would be able to qualify and show losses so they could get money. But anyways,
we are in support of VHCB receiving more funding for the good work they do, and that would then potentially be available to translate into more technical assistance for farmers. But yeah, Graham has more of our priorities to present, and I'm not sure if Charlotte already had a chance to say hi.
And Senator before we move on, Senator Pearson has a question or?
Yeah, thank you. A question for Caroline. When we were wrestling with folks about making sure relief money was available for non-dairy farmers, we had this sort of staggering admission from the agency that they said, you know, I'm paraphrasing, we don't know who they are. And we had understood and worked closely with you, Caroline, and Andrea before you, that, you know, there's 3,000 to 5,000 non-dairy producers. And anyway, so I'm wondering, is it your impression that this process has helped the agency? And I will ask the agency, but I'd like to have, in particular, your perspective, get a clue about the full range of the universe. For a lot of us, we're very interested in diversifying ag and see that as a way to strengthen the rural economy. And so I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that, and if any reason to hope that that has been one of the impacts that's been successful here.
Well, we'd really hope so. Let's put it that way. I don't want to discredit the agency in this moment, but I also appreciate that you remember very carefully how the creation of these successful programs have come into place, and that they wouldn't have come into place without significant advocacy. So maybe all I can say is that we would hope that there's lessons also to be learned from the agency side in the importance of in being more inclusive in specific programs and basically and I think this could, from our perspective, should have consequences in the in many directions for the agency and looking towards how to serve the ag community in the future. And maybe Graham has additional thoughts on this as well, but you know, for now, I think it's for us a good step to continue working with the agency to be able to influence how the survey is being rolled out, and we're hoping, especially there, that we can also get feedback from those constituents that have still not been including farmers who didn't have a reference year, for example. And yeah, and we're trying to, you know, we also have within our organization a deep memory about this and similar positions from the agency where we felt that not the entire ag sector has been represented appropriately.
Yeah. Thank you. So are we going to switch over to Graham now, Caroline?
Yep. Thank you all.
Thanks, Caroline. I know I already introduced myself, but I'll just say my name again because it's a hard one to say. Graham Unanks Rupanach. I live in Marshfield, and as well as being the policy director here at Vermont, I just wanted to mention I'm also a beef farmer. I raise grass-fed and finished beef cattle. I also do research on perennial vegetables and do pruning and other ag-related consultation and work in the area. Just quickly to reference specifically the question from Senator Pearson and the comment from Senator Starr about the record keeping. I really appreciate, Senator Pearson, you bringing that up. As Caroline said, I think we have institutional memory of this statement being made numerous times by the agency when they've been presenting on other financial data, and we've asked, well, what about the data for the 6,000 small farms that exist in the state? And they've said a very similar statement, which, as folks representing those folks, is very frustrating, to say the least. I am encouraged that there's this new USDA Small Farm Research Center, which I'm not sure if I have the right name for it, that's being located at the University of Vermont. And we've been working with the Center for Agroecology and Livelihoods Collective up there, which is working, they're developing a proposal for how to do outreach and sort of develop more research around who these farms are and what they're doing and how their ecological and social cultural impact, what it looks like in the state. So I find that really heartening, and maybe we can do some more work reaching out to that initiative to understand more about how they plan on doing some of that research and integrating with the Agency of Ag as well and some of our organizations who work with those farms. And I would just double down on what Caroline said, that we very much support the Vermont Housing Conservation Board getting funding. Their work supporting farms with record-keeping challenges, grants, loan access is invaluable. We saw it with the COVID relief funds, and I can speak as a farmer who's been a part of the Intervale Center's Farm Viability Program for a number of years, that those programs are exceptionally helpful from a financial management perspective in particular, as well as connecting you with all types of resources to support your business. Truly invaluable. I'd say also I wanted to comment on one thing Caroline already mentioned, that's the meat processing, and a little bit with my farmer hat on here. We've heard from a number of producers about this. And from my own personal perspective, I can give you my situation. I was called in November or October by the Northeast Kingdom Processing company where I get my beef processed. I send 8 to 15 beef per year to get processed there. And they said that we want to get you in for next year. Folks are calling who aren't normally calling us, folks from out of state and otherwise. We want to make sure we get some of our normal clients in. And I really appreciated that outreach effort by them. But we've also heard from other folks that that's not happening. We've talked to folks who for 10 years have gone to particular processes, have been told we don't have a slot for you next year. I called 3 other processors after that correspondence with Northeast Kingdom Processing. One was booked out through 2021 already. It was booking into 2022. We heard from another farmer down in the southern part of the state that their processor is already booked through 2022. I heard from another processor that they would get back to me, and when they did, they said, well, these are the dates we could get you, which isn't normally how the process works. And I think from a producer perspective, that's what's really challenging is we don't really know how to get spots anymore. You used to be able to call and know that you sort of first come, first serve, but now it's like, oh, we'll get back to you. And it's like, well, how is the decision being made, or which producers are being prioritized? And what we've seen, and we're part of a meat processing working group with folks from the Royal Butcher and from other processors and sort of facilitated by the Farm to Plate, what we're understanding is that a lot of those slots are being taken up also by larger producers who are seeing this challenge and investing in some of these processing facilities and taking a number of slots. For example, Walden Meats now is an investor in the packing house, and they've taken 40% of their processing slots. So you're seeing these more smaller producers who are sort of facing who are going to feel the brunt of this more than producers who are producing more consistently and have larger batches of animals. I wanted to touch on, just to get to another thing from a farmer hat on is I know you all worked on amendments to the shelter and shade law last year. And unfortunately, I think this was an issue that ourselves and a number of other organizations weren't paying adequate attention to at the time. And since then, we've heard from some producers and spoken with the Vermont Grass Farmers Association, NOFA Vermont, the Sheep and Goat Association, and others that have a lot of concerns about the language in there relating to specifically grazers. And as a grazer, I can just tell you the requirement to have shelter at all times and access to shelter at all times is not feasible based on a lot of our systems, and it sort of undermines some of the most progressive grazing and farming practices we have from an environmental standpoint and from an animal health standpoint. And I'm happy, I think it would just be great to bring some folks in from that crowd to understand their perspective and understand what animal welfare and animal condition looks like and the role that animal condition and the farmer perspective play assessment.
Is that something, Graham, that we could do? Could you organize a group of them and we could do for 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks? You say in 2 weeks, Senator?
Well, what we've heard and been told is this session is supposed to be sort of a short session instead of running on all next summer. And so, when there is an issue that's really troublesome, a lot of times after you pass a bill, it's appropriate to go back in the next year and say, well, we've had a couple of issues with that new proposal, and the legislature will go along with that fairly easy. Whereas if you wait for next year, we ought to get that done this year if we're going to try to upgrade that and get it done. So somebody's got to organize getting these people in that are having problems with this and explain that to us so we can get legislation drafted and updated and move forward.
I can certainly do that. I actually have a meeting that's going to be convened in the next week or week and a half with a number of these organizations and producers who have had these concerns expressed. So I can be in touch with you and bring that offer to them at the meeting that agriculture would be interested in from them. So thank you very much for offering that. Some issues that you haven't heard about, and I think that's just maybe I should step back from the transactional nature of this a little bit and just also say, appreciate you all for the work you did last year. That was an exceptionally long session. And I hope that given everything else going on in the country now, that you're all feeling safe and protected given what we anticipate coming in the next week or so. I know a lot of us are concerned, and if there's anything that organizations who work in the State House can do to just vocally support you and your safety, let us know, and feel free to respond at the end of my here in relationship to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, very much. I'm actually going to have to quickly get my 9-month-old daughter. So maybe I can pass it to Charlotte, and then I can come back and give you the last few issues I want to talk about. Charlotte, do you want to introduce yourself to folks?
Sure. I'm Charlotte Bolton. It's great to be here virtually. So I'm Rural Vermont's legislative intern, and I'll be observing a lot of your meetings in the coming months. I'm studying government, and I come from a farming background, so it's really exciting and interesting for me to be here and watch you all work.
Can you turn your volume up just a little, Charlotte?
Sorry, were you unable to hear me?
Maybe turn your video off, Charlotte. It's hard to hear you.
Oh, shoot. Okay, what about now? Is that better?
Yes.
Interesting. I'm Charlotte Boyd. It's great to be here. I'm Rural Vermont Legislative intern, so I'll be observing a lot of your meetings. I'm a government major, and I come from a background, so it's really exciting and interesting for me to be able to watch you all work. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, welcome to the crew.
All right, I'm back. This is Juniper. She might be joining me sometime this year. I'm at home with her on Thursdays. This is part of pandemic
A
life
lot
as
better
well.
looking than you are, Graham.
Well, I think that's a compliment. What do you think, June? Yeah, a little bit. So as you all know, we did work on pesticides as well last year. We're sort of working in a intersectional coalition to try to figure out what we can do strategically and justly to transition Vermont to which we're more reducing the use of and exposure to pesticides. And at this point, we don't have any bills that coalition is actively proposing at the moment, but we've been in touch with Kanika Gandhi at the Agency of Ag and Carrie Giguere, and it sounds like there's going to be some work between us and them about a proposal they're developing. And you'll hear more from us in the future about that work and the rewrite of the pesticide rules this year. The cannabis legislation, I wanted to briefly speak to you all about. You all passed what is now Act 164 last year. And as you know, I think I wrote the committees. We're part of a coalition including Justice for All and the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, NOFA Vermont, the Vermont Growers Association, and Trace Vermont, trying to bring more equity in agricultural access and racial equity to this act. And, given that the RAPs define agricultural product as any raw agricultural commodity that is principally produced on the farm, including products prepared from the raw agricultural commodities produced on the farm, given that cannabis is principally produced on the farm, given that the cultivation of tobacco, cultivation of crops for alcohol, cultivation of hemp, cultivation of biofuels are all considered agricultural, and given that the state of Vermont's strategic ag plan has multiple briefs about the critical nature of alcohol and alcohol ingredients on farms, the cultivation of hemp, and more non-fruit products related to the state of Vermont's ag future. Given that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, we really think there's potential for small farms and farmers in general to be a part of this marketplace and to be included in this. And we really would hope that the House and Senate Ag committees would take up the proposed amendments that our coalition is putting forth through the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance's Act legislation, such that we can actually just bring our constituents in just to speak with you about our concerns and about the opportunities these folks see and about how they feel like they're being left out of this conversation. And our organization, it was a tough call to work on this. This is a very taboo subject. We've been working on it since 2018, a little bit here and there, and really sort of concentrated on more in the last couple of sessions, but really it was very frustrating trying to have a conversation about the agricultural side of this in Senate Judiciary or in House Ag or House Natural Resources. And I really feel like the Senate committees are really, the Ag committees are really best positioned to have a conversation about scale appropriate agricultural regulation and what it could look like in this. And just given that this is not considered an agricultural product in this bill, you're automatically disqualifying all the folks who have land in ag easements, all the folks who have land in current use, all the folks who have infrastructure in that stuff, anyone who wants to pursue education related to agriculture or grants that might be explicitly for agriculture, but in relationship to this plant. So we'd love to have some consideration of our coalition by this committee on that subject. And I think last couple things, this BIPOC Land Access and Opportunity Act, Representative Chena is going to bring forth. We're really looking forward to having a conversation about that and supporting the work of that group. We're also some grassroots organizing with the Everytown Project to sort of get the ball rolling outside the legislature on that. And we support NOFA Vermont in their work to further fund the local purchasing initiative. As Caroline mentioned, funding for the Vermont Housing Conservation Board and to get a line item to fund the farm share program. Currently, it's funded by donations, and we just think that's a very helpful program, especially now with the challenges both at the farm side of viability, but also with food insecurity. It's a program which, if you aren't aware, gives free shares to folks in need. Farmers pay a quarter of the cost of the share, and these folks who have offered donations essentially pay the other 3/4. And we think it'd be super helpful if that could be a long-standing program funded by the state. And again, we're just always mindful of how our farm community is impacted by healthcare and childcare issues. And I think during the pandemic, this has really also become very challenging. I mean, I love being home in Juniper, and we're facing some challenges as a family, just trying to figure out how to make this all work. And we've heard so many stories from folks about childcare challenges in particular during this time, but also prior to this time. And I hope you all do have a chance to hear from Jackie Folsom too about the fairs. I thought that Jackie's testimony on House it was really important to take into consideration. But that's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Jackie is up next, and if you folks want to stay on, there's no reason why you can't. Chris, I believe, has a question.
I just wanted to comment on your requests about cannabis. The Senate did pass a bill that considered cannabis production agriculture, and so I can appreciate it's a natural ask to have us push that, but the reality is the agenda that you've just outlined across the board is more than a committee can tackle in 1 year, and the particulars of cannabis as an agricultural product, and I happen to agree with you, is even if we spent the time to promote that, and even if we got it through the Senate, which again the Senate has done, you run into a real roadblock in House Ways and Means. And I think actually your own representative plays the key role there. So I guess I would just say I'm sure if a bill is moving, we would look at it. But the hard fact of the matter is there are strong opponents in House Ways and Means to exactly what you're asking for. As you know, I personally played a big role insisting that for the smallest growers who are enrolled in current use, that not be not punt them out of current use. That was hard to get that pathetic little exception. So I guess I would just ask you to take your speech and bring it to Janet Ansell. And when you get somewhere in that committee, come back. And I'm sure I'm not the only one on this committee that will say, yeah, we'll back you up. But it's just, we have to juggle an impossible workload in a very short amount of time with a crushing amount of needs that are all really legitimate. And so, if we don't take this on, please understand that's at least where I'm coming from. Why? Because it's fruitless at this point. That's all.
Yeah, and that of course is what we heard from our group last year on the Senate side. Hey, it isn't going to pay to do all this work and then get it thrown out when it gets over to the House. So I think the group, your group, and other groups have got a lot of work to do on the House side before. I mean, it grows on farmland very well. I mean, greenhouses is a different issue, but what grows on farms should be a farm product or an ag product. And so good luck to you, Graham, and we'd be glad to help any way we can. Did you have anything else, Caroline, or should we move on to Jackie?
I think we're all good. Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you. And as I said, you can stay on if you'd like, and we'll welcome Jackie Folsom to our committee. And good to see you, Jackie.
Great to see you guys. Thank you for inviting me in. It's kind of strange for me to be seeing Senator Pearson's face because usually I'm sitting on the desk behind him. So this is kind of fun, but it's also, you know, you can stretch your wings a little. Oh, there you go. Now I feel comfortable. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to be talking about the Vermont Farm Bureau as well as the Vermont Fairs and Field Days Association today, because I think we've got some interesting information on both. I think the only person that I don't know is Senator Parent, and welcome to the committee. And I'm also very excited that you're going to be on institutions because you'll play a big part in our fairs when we come into that committee later on. Just a quick reminder, Vermont Farm Bureau is an over 100-year-old member-driven farm organization in the state of Vermont. There are 51 farm bureaus across the country. American Farm Bureau just finished their virtual meeting yesterday where they were working on policy. We represent all sizes and kinds of farms, and our president currently was reelected at our annual meeting in November, President Joe Tisbert from Cambridge. He is an organic vegetable farmer. And Senator Starr, you might be interested to know that our new vice president is Mary White.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah,
she's a fireball.
She is. She stepped right up, and we're very excited to have her in a major leadership position. So hopefully we'll be able to have her come into the committee and talk about dairy issues if you're interested later on.
Yep.
We're looking at some of the same issues that rural Vermont has presented, and it's kind of fun to be after them today because I was before them yesterday. So we're kind of like doing a little tag team thing. Some of the things that we are looking at as far as our policy issues this year is there is going to be another run at the limited liability for agritourism initiative. And I think Beth Kennett and Mary White are both involved in that. I think there's a bill, or there may be a draft floating around. We've actually done a lot of work on background information on that would be great to, it would be great to share with you. The House has introduced age 58, which is a right to repair bill. Last year, the House introduced a right to repair bill that was generic to all manufacturing. This is specific to agriculture, and it was introduced by Representative Kornheiser down in the southern part of Vermont. I haven't had a chance to go through word by word, but we'll be interested in seeing if that goes anywhere on the House side. Caroline mentioned the humane shelter bill, and as you know, there was an attempt last year when that bill came over to the Senate side to change some of the language regarding the exemption for dairy that has been in that statute since the beginning. And while we'll be interested to hear from farmers about their challenges with the grazing issue, we're also concerned that we don't change the language on the exemption for dairy. And we've talked about the national farm paperwork that all dairy farmers have to sign on to get their milk picked up. And we'll be glad to share more of that information if that conversation goes that route again. The issue about raw milk, we're a little, we've always been a little concerned about that due to food safety. And so we enjoy the conversations that we have from some of our other advocacy groups. But I did want to bring up an issue that I mentioned to Carolyn Partridge yesterday. One of the challenges with raw milk being sold from a dairy farmer who's producing it to a CSA neighbor down the street is the liability issue follows the product. It doesn't follow the farmer. So as you're looking into how you can make raw milk more available, I'd like to suggest that you bring in some insurance folks to talk about that. Mary might be a good one to do that. I know the reason I know about this issue is because my husband also is an insurance salesman, and he's getting a lot of calls for this sort of thing, and working with farmers who are trying to, for example, as Caroline said, lives at the end of a class 4 road and is trying to sell raw milk, but has a friend that's got a farm stand down the road. So the issue of insurance and the liability issue on raw milk is something that you folks, I think, should probably talk about as you're talking about other changes in the raw milk. We had a great discussion yesterday in House Agriculture about food security, and towards the end of that discussion, it segued into food security for animals. Oddly enough, there's a drought. There's been a challenge with feed. And so we got into a great discussion, and actually Graham was going to do some work on contacting some national organizations that he's connected with. I put up a post on the Vermont Dairy Discussion Board yesterday and got some great comments back. We are now working with the Vermont Equine Council, who is a member of Vermont Farm Bureau, is actually working with the Agency of Agriculture to try to come up with a listing of farms who are selling or who have hay or silage available to sell. This is a huge problem for our farmers. And so yesterday we came up with some good leads, which we will be sharing. And also when I send out my Under the Golden Dome report this Friday, I've got a section in there that asks, do you need feed or do you have feed to sell? So we're going to try to be a little proactive on that and see if we can actually come up with a listing either through the Agency of Ag or through Farm Bureau, or maybe in cooperation with Rural Vermont, because I think this is an important issue for the farms. And it was kind of funny that, you know, we're all worried about the food security issue for people, but the food security for animals was something else that nobody actually had been thinking of till some of the farmers brought it up. So I just wanted to put that on your radar, and we'll keep you posted with that. One of the people that we work with besides the Equine Council is Laura Hardy from the Vermont, from the Milk Promotion group, and she's the one that's been putting the broadsides in your legislative emails about different things. We did one on the National FARM program last year that was widely distributed, and the most recent one that I think it was in your mailboxes last week had to do with the climate change issues on farms, and John Roberts and Maria Audette from the Champlain Valley Farmers Coalition did a really great job on some presentations. And so they were featured there, and we'll be looking at some more issues that we'll have Laura send out to you. If you have anything that you would like to have us focus on, please let us know. I think the next issue is going to talk about the breakfast on the farm and how they're trying to do that virtually this year. We're very excited about the information from the Agency of Agriculture that they received a $7 million grant to do phosphorus reduction on farms and actually pay farmers to do that. So we'll be watching that quite closely. And Carolyn, I would like to say, since you folks are still on here, if you'd like us to help with that survey that you're doing, please let me know, because it's something that I'd like to send out to my members too. We also would like to try and set up a meet and greet. We've had several groups that have students that work with them that really enjoyed coming to visit with you folks last year. Thanks, Caroline. And of course, the Fairs Association members always used to come in too. And I totally understand what a challenge that is. So, you know, you've got a lot of groups that want to come in and give you updates and talk to you. And if there's any way we can help facilitate that, it would be great. Farm Bureau usually did 2 a year. We did one before the crossover and one after. And the Fairs Association usually came in the end of January. So we know that's not going to happen. So if there's any way that we can help facilitate meeting with you all of you, we would really be grateful. One thing
I think, Jackie, I was thinking about that from talking with Caroline and her group. I don't know, but what we might do, and I got to talk to the committee about this, is see, we can do that most anytime because we're all on Zoom and your group hasn't got to drive to Montpelier and then find us busy and, the schedules change. We could, schedule a time for the committee possibly to set aside for that particular thing and give you a couple of weeks lead time. And then we could possibly do it for both groups. But anyways, I think it's going to be easier. And in our little tiny room, we can only fit 2 or 3, 4 people. This way we can fill the screen.
We were so friendly, though. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Chris, did you have some thoughts on that? No?
No, I think it's a good idea. We should talk about it.
Yeah. So we'll discuss that both for both groups or any group, really.
That'd be great.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Jackie. And maybe you're going to get to this, so if I'm anticipating your next part, forgive me. But I was curious about the fairs, how they made out. Have any of them already made a decision about this coming year? We keep hearing every day there's a new thing about the vaccine. It's going to be here, it's going to be there, it's going to be for 65 and up. It's going to be, we don't know what it's going to be. But assuming it all worked out, there might be a way, especially by August, for some of the fairs to operate again. So I was just curious.
That's exactly where I was going next, unless anybody has any questions about the Farm Bureau.
No.
No? I had to laugh when Senator Pearson leaned back because that's always how we were in committee room. We'd all go like this. Okay, I'll switch and wear my Vermont Fairs and Field Days hat. I do have updates from most of the fairs. First of all, I'd like to thank you all very much for advocating on behalf of that $500,000 that they received last year. It really helped them go through the summer with very little events. The Vermont Farm Show, as you know, has canceled the 2021 session. That would have been coming up in 2 weeks, actually. And they are planning on working on a 2022 event at the Champlain Valley Expo. They did try to do a virtual event. I am no longer the manager of that event. So the new person who's younger and much more astute in technology than I am or was or ever will be, worked with the vendors that we had. But the general consensus was, and all of you who have ever been to the farm show know, that farm show is a little different. And it really, the impact of that farm show is on getting to the show and visiting with the people. So nobody was really interested in doing a virtual event, which is very sad, but considering the vendors and the visitors that we have, it was totally understandable. Because the farm show occurred in 2020, they were not eligible for CARES money. And this time around, now next Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday afternoon, the grants committee for the fairs and field days will be meeting to distribute the 2021 capital grants and the stipend. And the farm show did not apply for a stipend. They actually have a pretty good pot of money there, thanks to some wise investing when it was housed at the Agency of Agriculture. Addison Fair paid off their paid down some of their operating loans and some of their, they have a term loan. They did absolutely no activities over the summer, but they have been meeting and they are looking at, I think they're holding off planning the fair, which would be in August, but they're looking at hosting weekend events, maybe a 4-H weekend so that the kids can do their 4-H animal judging, and maybe a tractor pull weekend and a Taste of Vermont weekend. So they are looking at a little bit out of the box for them, but that's what they're looking at. Caledonia Fair, it's Dick Warren.
Before you move on to you were talking about Addison County. How the question came up yesterday or earlier this week. How did they make out with their wastewater business and the building issue?
I believe through the help of Representative Norris that was resolved with ANR, and there's either an MOU or something to that effect that will allow them to use that system as needed. So they came out okay. Thank you for asking. They were very happy, especially considering the amount of money they were going to have to spend. So,
yeah, we're happy too because we spent hours on that,
I know.
if not days. But I'm glad it worked out for everybody's to everybody's satisfaction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Caledonia paid down bills, some of their annual bills, such as electricity and water and that sort of thing. They also, not with that money, but they also just put up a brand new antique building that they are going to, I think that they did do a ribbon cutting on. They had a soft opening, so they're very excited about that. They were one of several fairs that hosted drive-in movies this summer. Dick said that it didn't work out really well for them, but it did work out for a couple of the other fairs, so it was an option for them. The Maple Festival is sadly canceled for this year. Cecile Brannon is, she's a fireball and she's beside herself that they had to cancel, but we're still all under, the unavailability of having consumers come in. They spent the CARES money last year on paying the expenses that they had incurred for their 2020 Maple Festival, which was canceled because they had already had down payments with vendors and with rides and other things. And so that was very helpful to them, but I'm very sorry to say that they are one of the two fairs now, the Farm Show and the Maple Festival, that have canceled for this year, and they would have been in April, so that was early on. Lamoille paid down on their loan, which allowed them to save some money. And I got a note from Robin Wright, who is their president, that said if there is no further funding this year, they at least have money to pay on their loan going forward, but it's going to be tight for them. Orleans County paid down on loans and used it for insurance, but they were also one of the three fairs that did drive-ins this summer, and they were pretty successful at it. I think they had two at least, and so that worked out for them. It was kind of an interesting concept. Rutland decided to restructure their loan, so they did an interest-free payment for 6 months, and that really helped them. Senator Collmore, they've got a really good group of folks down there that are really working hard on making that fair be viable. And they've paid down most of their loans, which is wonderful. They're all caught up with a lot of things. They also did drive-ins, and they were able to hold a flea market event in October. And actually, they worked very closely with Deputy Secretary Brady over at ACCD on issues having to do with safety and public protocol, to the fact that Mr. Brady was very happy with them, and he was just very excited that one of the fairs worked so hard with his organization, and everything came out well.
That's good to hear, Jackie, because that is, after all, the Vermont State Fair.
Yes, sir. It is. I'm sorry, I go by a county, so when I'm thinking of them, I don't call it that.
No, don't be silly. Most of us call it the Rutland Fair too.
I know. So we do have a Fairs Association meeting next Tuesday. It's going to be on Zoom. We are having Mr. Brady come in and talk to us through another organization of advocates that I work with. There is an events coalition that's working with TED, trying to figure out if the administration is going to loosen up any on event planning and things that they were going to be requiring of us. I have to say right now, it isn't looking good. I mean, even as fast as the vaccine goes out, there's a lot of people that still have to have that need the extra dose. I heard somebody say the other day it might take as long as 70 weeks, which I'm hoping it doesn't, but it's slow coming out, and that's the challenge. I did have a question yesterday too from House Ag about how the amusement ride companies are doing. They were shut down totally last year in March, and huge investments in those rides. We have 3 fairs that rely on a company called Dreamland, which is out of Massachusetts. And I'm just not sure how those folks are surviving. I believe that they all applied for PPP. But the other challenge that came up about that is some of the folks that they bring into work may not be considered essential. And so would they have the vaccines? Would we want to have them on the fairgrounds? I mean, it's an issue. We did get a note I got a note the other day that Governor DeWine over in Ohio, their state legislature had passed a bill that allowed fairs and field days to open up for the 2021 season, and the governor vetoed it. Now, I do have to say that Ohio last year, they did, there's 88 counties in Vermont, in Ohio. Most of them do have county fairs, and the state of Ohio gave I believe it was $50,000 to each fair to hold they call it a junior fair. It's actually the 4-H event. So most of the counties were able to have the 4-H kids come in or Zoom in, have their judging, and then auction off their animals. So that worked for many of them. But there were no fairs allowed in Ohio, and there will not be fairs allowed in Ohio this year. So we have a couple of concerns. We're waiting to see what the administration is going to have in the ag agency budget, because that's where the stipend money is. And in the past, it's been about $95,000. This is so instrumental for 2020. It'll be 2022 money, but it's really necessary because it's the money that turns on the lights, buys the premiums, buys the ribbons, pays for the premiums. It's really important money to the fairs now more than ever. The other challenge we have is that last year we heard specifically from Senator Benning and Senator Mazza from the Senate Institutions Committee that because of the downgrade in the bonds, that there will very probably not be any capital funds for the fairs going forward. Now, we do have money this year or that will be distributed in 2021. And Senator Parent, those funds, there were about $250,000 that were divided up on a formula between not 14, probably 12 fairs. And they use matching funds. So it isn't as if you're just handing that money out. It's been used in the past. Specifically, we've asked our fairs to do 2 to 5 year capital improvement plans. So a lot of it has been used for putting electrical lines underground, for fixing up bathrooms. In Addison's case, that was really nice to do. And I think up in Franklin County, part of that money helped build that beautiful new building that they've got up there on the fairgrounds. So we're very, very concerned that that capital money is in jeopardy. And finally,
when did they tell you this, Jackie?
End of last year. Yeah, he said that already. He knew ahead of time going into 2022 that there was going to be a challenge with the capital funds. So we've been gnawing on that bone for a year. So we're hoping he's wrong. We're hoping that we can get some advocacy in there to convince them of the need, along with a lot of other people. But in the meantime, I'll just go back to thanking you all again for the advocacy on that money that we received from the CARES funding, and just strongly suggesting that based on the probability that at least a majority of the fairs won't be held this year, we may be coming back and asking for funding to get them through another year. It's not something I want to do, but it is something that's so important to these fairs because they have no ability to hold events. And events are their livelihood, and they're sitting on a lot of property that's important. They're sitting on a lot of educational opportunities that are important. They're sitting on a lot of Vermont ag that's important to the community and the state. So that's my plug and my plea for them. And I'll let you know after Tuesday when we talk to Ted, and if we hear anything more. in the meantime, if you hear anything more, or if you have access to the governor, where we can at least know if he's going to shut us down, we'd like to know sooner than later. I guess that's the other thing that we're waiting to hear. It will be another for us. We're not the only events organizations that are being challenged. You know, all the fun runs are gone. The dragon boat races are gone. There's an immense part of the fabric of Vermont that isn't happening. But a lot of these things also don't have capital investments like the fairs do.
What about the Essex, Champlain Valley? Are they able to do any events or?
They have done events. They, of course, they were early on. They were one of the sites for the overflow for the ICU units, which thank heavens we didn't need to use. They've been used for the vaccinations and the testings. They did have several drive-in events this year. They had a drive-in concert. I think they had two maybe, where everybody came up and there was a concert stage put up, and the folks that were doing the concert were singing over the radio to people who had driven in. They did have drive-in movies. They had three very successful Taste of the Fairs events where they had some of their vendors. I think Representative Brennan with his Onion Shack was open, and they had some of 10 or 12 other vendors. It was a ticketed event. It was, you had to drive through, you picked up your food, and then you went out on the other side and went home and had your fair food. So that was kind of, and I think Lamoille did the same thing. Of course, Champlain Valley, they did receive PPP funds.
Yeah.
They're a fair that had a lot of staff. They've laid off just about everybody. And they've also requested a deferment on one of their big loans because they had built that second the Miller building there, which now is not getting used for the farm show or any of the other events that they held. So they're not allowed to utilize the buildings, but they have been allowed to utilize the outside area.
Yeah. Getting back to the bonding, Chris, have you heard anything about that issue over in finance?
Well, not yet, but we did hear the news reports that our downgrade, that we'd been downgraded because of demographics and because of the economy, I think. And we know that the treasurer and others have been increasingly restricting our bonding capacity, which I do hope we'll address. I mean, interest rates are at a historic low, and it's tricky. We really ought to be stimulating the economy, not retreating.
Yes, not
that's my
shrinking.
She met with the treasurer met with institutions yesterday. The treasurer met with institutions yesterday and said they're not going to recommend a further decrease in bonding for the next 2 years because of those needs. So they had a plan to shut down for the next 2 years, but that's not going to be what's coming forward.
And I hadn't heard anything in appropriations, but according from Pearson and parents' standpoint, I've been around government a lot of years, and it's a wise move for government to do when times are hard is to borrow money, bond for money, and keep people working and moving forward, because that keeps your economy from going into a recession. And Secretary or Commissioner Pierce is really screwed up on all that stuff as far as I'm concerned. And I told her this, and that the purpose of government is one major purpose is to do things for people that people can't do singly for themselves. So you band together and do good things, and that's one purpose of government. So hopefully, Jackie, that won't happen, and we'll still be able to help the fairs with some money toward the stipend and all that. But anyway, any other questions for Jackie? Or Jackie, do you have anything else for us?
I don't think so. I know in the past years, we've always come in with the fairs and given you an economic impact survey about the amount of money that they've sent back into the coffers of the state with the taxes and so on. It's zero. It's probably less than zero.
That report isn't going to take long this year.
No, all my fairs, when I send that out in December, I just hear the collective groaning like, oh my God, I had to go back and figure out how many people showed up and this and that. I might ask them to send me information about not necessarily the finances, but the amount of people that did show up for some of these diverse events that they did, such as the tastes of the fairs and the drive-ins, just to give you an idea of what they're trying to do. Right now, as I said, I don't know as many fairs are up and running as far as what planning for this year. I do know that Orleans has made arrangements with their fair, with their amusement ride, but they've also changed the date of that fair, Senator Starr. I think it's going to be Labor Day instead of in August. So it's going to overlap with CVE if we are allowed to hold fairs. So there has been some movement so far. I have not had any of my fairs, I say our fairs, say that they're not going to reopen. I'm knocking on wood about that because there are a couple, particularly some of the smaller ones that might be in trouble. The one other piece that we still have to solve for the Vermont State Fair and Orleans is the issue of the demo derbies. That one's hanging out there in the wind. We're not really too worried about it, although Senator Collmore, I believe Mr. Congdon from the Vermont State Fair is still trying to work with somebody over at Castleton to do a physics review on where the barricades have to go. We would like to solve that for them and for Orleans this year while they have the time, just in case they have to make capital investments. Because Caledonia has gotten a letter from the Secretary of State saying that their situation is okay. So that was one positive thing. So we're going to be working with Jason Sicard up at Orleans and with Robert Congdon at the Vermont State Fair to try to resolve that issue on the demo derby challenges this year and get that done so that they can be up and running next year.
Chris, did you have a question? No? Any other questions from committee? If not, I don't know if Caroline or Graham are still on. Did you
They're
folks have anything to add or say?
They're both gone, Bobby.
They're both gone. Yeah.
And they heard all this yesterday.
And Jackie, if after you meet or when you meet with your association, if they would like to meet with us on Zoom sometime into the future, certainly feel free to tell them. We'd be glad to, spend some time with them if they would like to meet with us.
I'm sure they would, Senator. I know they really enjoy coming in and spending that whole day working. I mean, we usually visited 10 committees in that one day. So it was a real stretch for me to try to schedule these folks and move them around, but they really did appreciate the interaction with you and telling you about their fairs and what they do. So I will extend the invitation and we'll definitely make that happen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if there's nothing else from the committee, thank you, Jackie, for your time and being with us, and keep us abreast of anything that you might hear that's happening that you think we should know about.
I certainly will.
Certainly get hold of us.
I will. So, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
So is there, are there other things that the committee would like to bring up this morning and chat about for next week's agenda? Because I think supposed to put that together tomorrow morning, Linda and I, and I want to make sure if there is something that you would like to get on there that, we plan it in.
I just want to get out. It was mentioned the VHCB comment, but Carrie Atherton, who they showed from Ayers Hill Farm, is one of my farmers who is doing their own bottling of milk, and she would be a great person to bring in at some point to talk about that, and why they chose to do that, and how we could be helpful. If we can expand, some kind of operations of that nature.
She was the one that they showed the farm this morning.
Yeah.
VHCB.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Bobby, go ahead, Corey.
I'm all set.
Were we going to have a day about the food insecurity issue as well next week?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get that scheduled in with Betsy and all the food people,
Okay.
Hunger Free Vermont and them.
Yep. Okay.
I think Betsy Rosenthal and was it Kay, and there's a whole group of those folks. And the other thing is getting the lady from the ed department in to see how the school meals were going. And yeah, we've got to get going on that and stick with it once we get to rolling. I don't think Linda isn't with us, but I don't think we had anybody call in and request time other than these folks we've already had on or finished up with today, except for Maddie Kemper. She's going to be on tomorrow from NOFA, and she'd requested some time, so I didn't want to drag it on for a long period. So Maddie will be on, and she's gonna, I think, bring some people along with her to some farmer people to testify. But be thinking about the schedule for next week, and if there's anybody or any group that you want to get on, just give Linda a call or send an email or send me one, and we'll get it on there. Is there anything else that any of you would want to bring up today, Chris?
Just that somebody was watching our discussion yesterday about the farm to school discussion and the incentives, and sent Linda a contact around New York and their experience. It's now 5 years up and running, so they have some good data. It's been actually quite effective. So I don't know when you aim to do that, but I am hoping we can have that conversation. And Betsy Rosenbluth helped Linda find the person who could give us some data in Vermont from New York. So just keep that in your thinking, please.
Yeah, and don't be shy about bringing it up again. I don't think we've got anybody shy on this committee. So always feel free to bring anything up that that may not float up. So I think we're all done. I don't know if any of you must all got that posting about the security information at noon, if you want to listen to it. So I think we'll call it a morning, and certainly want to thank Gail for being with us this morning to fill in and help out. So if there isn't anything else, thanks a lot, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.